A few years ago, I was completely convinced that God had called me to live a life in undivided devotion to Him. The Bible tells us that if we're able, it is better to live in undivided devotion to God than to be a married woman or man. That a woman or man who is married is concerned with pleasing their spouse, but that someone who lives in undivided devotion, they're only concerned with pleasing God. And this undivided devotion is more valuable to the kingdom of God. So there are people that God calls and sets apart to live without a spouse. And I thought, surely that's me. I've not had healthy relationships in my life. I don't know what that looks like. I have been on a healing journey with the Lord, learning about red flags and abuse and the traits of various types of abusers and the abuse cycle and trauma bonding and all these kinds of things, boundaries and attachment style. So I've been learning all these things, and it took me years and years to work through all of the trauma and be in a place where I felt that I could be a blessing to a man rather than a burden. And it took so long, in fact, that now I am middle-aged and the dating pool is pretty shallow. It's shallow for everyone my age, but it is especially so for those who are truly on fire for the Lord and walking it out in obedience. So I had surrendered to the hard fact that it was unlikely that I would be married, and I truly believed for a time that God was calling me to live unmarried and in an undivided devotion, and I was fine with that. The Bible calls these people that are set apart for a life without a spouse eunuchs. Contrary to the commonly held belief that eunuch is only reserved for those who have been castrated, in truth, not all eunuchs were. But what the term really means, in a biblical sense, is someone who is living only for the purpose of being in service to the king. So by biblical definition, when the Bible is referring to someone being a eunuch, it's not necessarily that they are castrated. They can just live a life of sexual purity and undivided devotion and service. It's a strange thing that happens when you're on a healing journey, because most people to some degree are toxic. When you're toxic too, there's lots of people you can date, tons of people. But as you heal and learn to communicate in healthy and productive ways and learn to set boundaries and respect boundaries, when you learn to be autonomous even in a relationship and not fall into enmeshment, the available partners that you would be compatible with becomes very few. So I had made peace with it. And then God gave me this crazy dream. I mean, I had been telling myself, a man would be nothing but a distraction. He would be a depletion. I believed that because it's all I had ever known. The men that I had in my life were all consuming. There wasn't room for anything else. Then I had this dream, and in the dream, I had a husband. And so in my past relationships, I was constantly needing to modify my behavior in efforts to please a controlling men who were very dangerous if they got angry. And in the dream, it was so different from anything I had ever experienced because I couldn't see the man's face. But in the dream, I was married, and the husband I was married to, the dynamic between me and this man was not like anything I've ever experienced or even seen up close. I've seen it in movies. I've seen people that appear to be something like that on social media. But up close and personal, all I've ever been witness to or experienced personally was abuse, control. And in the dream, this was so different. I was relaxed and my quirky, weird self. I wasn't monitoring or censoring my speech. I was truly just relaxed and saying whatever random thing came in my mind and just being awkward and silly. And I woke up and I thought it must have been, initially I thought this has got to be Satan trying to mess with me. He's trying to get me all distracted and he's trying to get me back into the mindset where I'm making a man an idol. And I believe that we as women can do this. We can make a man, whether real or imagined, into an idol. And I thought that's a bondage I broke free from. And Satan is trying to manipulate me to get me back into that bondage. And then a few days later, I had another dream. I have felt for a number of years like God was calling me to do something very specific. And so I felt like if I were to embark on another attempt for yet another relationship, I would have to forfeit doing the things that God has called me to do. I thought, if I'm gonna, take on another relationship, there'll be just a whole lot asked of me and it'll be all consuming. And there's no way I could do both. I couldn't be married and do the calling. But in this second dream, again, I was married, but in this dream, one of the things that that really stuck with me was the fact that I was doing the calling. And not only was this man who was my husband not a hindrance to that, he was actually helping to facilitate it, enabling and empowering and supportive. It was just so different than anything I've ever experienced and anything that I ever even imagined. And I woke up feeling very perplexed, very confused. And a number of years ago, someone had given me a prophetic word that God was going to bring a husband to me. But I had brushed it off because very few single Christian women don't like to hear that kind of prophetic word given. So I had just dismissed it as someone just given me the rubber stamp prophetic word for a Christian lady. But he didn't just say God told me that he's going to bring you a husband. He said that before I fully stepped into my calling, God was going to bring the man. Because my calling was really big and it was something that God wanted me to have support when I stepped into it. And so, anyway, fast forward all these years later that I have just dismissed that and stopped looking and hoping and praying for a husband. And then in dream number 2, the guy was helping me with the calling. And I just was completely perplexed by this. And then I started to wonder, are these dreams from God? Is God trying to tell me something? And then I started to think, you know what? I'm still really damaged from the stuff I've been through. And it's like, I have done so many years of healing. And yet there's still stuff there, There's still stuff that I struggle with. And who's going to want an unhealed woman? I'm at the place where I feel like I could be a blessing to a man and not a burden. But, I didn't come through the things in my past unscathed. There's some scars. There's some shrapnel. I didn't walk through it without sustaining some damage. And then I had this third dream. And again, in this dream, I'm married. And in this dream, this relationship was having a healing effect on me. You know, when we go through trauma and abuse, especially if your adult life is just sort of like on loop, replaying the same kind of stuff that you experienced in childhood, when your childhood was difficult and traumatic and there was abuse and neglect, and then, your adult life is full of more trauma and abuse and neglect. The healing journey is like peeling an onion. And if you've ever peeled an onion that had a big cut in it, as you pull off the layers, the indentation, it's less with each layer. But if it's a very deep indentation, you'll be peeling the onion and you'll be like, wow, that really goes deep. You take off another layer there, it's still there. But another thing, so what you're realizing on your healing journey that's like peeling an onion is, wow, a lot of this stuff goes really deep. And there's just more that needs to be healed than you recognized in the beginning. Another thing that happens is you come into agreement with lies from the enemy. As you're walking through just decades of abuse and trauma, you come into agreement with lies like, I'm not lovable. I deserve to be abused. These kinds of things. And those are very difficult to overcome. But in this third dream, it was having a healing. The way this man was with me was having a healing effect on me. And it was also exposing and destroying these lies that I had come into agreement with, like that I'm just hard to be around, that I am not lovable, that I deserve abuse, that no one would stick around and deal with me unless they had a reason, like that they needed someone that fit their needs as a victim. For most of my life, it's been beyond my ability to wrap my mind around the concept that a healthy man who had no agenda would sincerely, genuinely love me. But in this dream, this man adored me. And the things that I had accepted would just always be residual of what I had been through. Those things were being healed. These areas that I had not been able to heal in therapy and with self-help and doing the journal work, it was being healed in this relationship, and these lies were being broken off, and I was coming into agreement with what God said, not the lies that the enemy had gotten me to believe. And again, I woke up feeling confused, and I said to the Lord, Lord, are these dreams from you? Are these dreams just the enemy messing with my head, or my own mind just telling me stories, or is this you preparing my heart for something you're going to do? I said, I need a confirmation. I need some kind of sign that, because I'm going to put it out of my mind and forget about it if it's not from you. But if it is from you, I want to know, because I want to come into agreement with it. I want to start declaring it. I want to have faith in it. So please give me a confirmation. And right then, I opened up TikTok, and there was a video of a pastor, and he says right out the gate, he says, if God has given you 3 dreams about the same thing, he is preparing your heart for something he's about to do. And at first I was like, wow. And then I started to think about it and I was like, well, the phones listen to you. And this could be just the algorithm putting in front of me something that I've already been talking to God about. And so I said, Lord, I got to have a confirmation that can only be from you, that it's you, it's not the algorithm, and I know for sure it has to be you, something that only you can do. And then just as clear as day, I hear this voice of spirit say, okay, what do you want? And that caught me off guard. I was like, I don't know. Oh my goodness, I don't know what the sign should be. I hadn't thought that far ahead. And so I thought about it for a minute, and then I said, I don't know, Lord, it's just something crazy. Something crazy like, you know what? A yellow butterfly is going to come and land on me. And it's not going to just land for a quick second. It's going to stay sitting on me for a ridiculously long time. So long, in fact, that I'll laugh out loud because I'll know that it's you, that it could only be you. A couple days later, I was downtown Grapevine at Max on Main, and I'm having lunch out on their patio. So I'm downtown Grapevine on Main Street in a restaurant on the patio having lunch, and a yellow butterfly comes and lands on me. And I couldn't believe it. I had to document it. So the butterfly had landed on my right hand, and with my left hand, I began digging around in my purse, searching for my phone. And of course, the phones are huge and they are hard to manage with one hand. But I found the phone, I pulled it out. Whole time, the butterfly's still sitting right there on me, on my hand, on my right hand, as I'm digging with my left hand in my bag. I find the phone, I pull it out, and then I've got to manage it. I've got to open up the screen. I've got to, put in the code and open up the camera app and get into position. And I take several photos, probably 3 or 4 photos I took of this yellow butterfly. And then I put the phone down. And even after I had put the phone down, the butterfly just stayed. The butterfly just continued to sit there. And it stayed for so long that eventually I laughed out loud. And right when I laughed, God brought to my memory where I had said, and the butterfly will stay so ridiculously long that I'll have to just laugh out loud and I'll know that it was you.